Thank you for joining us today for today's Ask an Expert webinar. We will wait a couple of minutes to give all participants a chance to log on. We will now begin today's Ask an Expert webinar, Fundraising 201. I'm Mitch Menchaca, Executive Director of the Association of California Symphony Orchestras, and joined by my colleague, Caroline Furman, Conference and Programs Manager. We are excited you have joined us today. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. You have joined today's webinar in listen-only mode and can hear today's presentation through your computer speakers. If you would like to participate and listen by phone, please press the Use Telephone button on your control panel. Follow the prompts and you will be connected. We want to make sure that this webinar is interactive even though you are muted and in listen-only mode. One way to participate is to ask questions. To ask a question, simply enter the question in the questions pane and hit submit. During the presentation, we will take time to address questions that you have submitted. We will also try to take Q&A at the end of the presentation. Another way to participate are through poll questions. Our presenter will ask a couple of multiple choice questions that you will see on your screen for you to answer. Answering poll questions allows the presenter to know a little bit more about you. If you run into any problems during today's webinar, please call the ACSO office at 800-495-2276 or email us at office@axo.org. Today's webinar is being recorded for archival purposes. Now let's begin today's webinar. Our presenter is Kelly Lucera. She was appointed Executive Director of the Long Beach Symphony in 2013. Kelly's successes include ending each year with a surplus, increasing the board of directors and the donor base, creating a planned giving program, and assembling a strong new administrative team. Kelly previously served as president and CEO of the Pacific Corral in Orange County for 9 years and vice president of the Orange County School for the Arts, where she raised over $39 million, including $25 million for a capital campaign. Kelly served for a decade on the board of directors of ACSO, and she served as our past president. She also was named a city commissioner in 2015 and elected the 2016-2017 vice president for the Long Beach Rotary. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
So before we get started, we thought we would do a couple of those poll questions. And the first poll that we want to do and ask you, everyone, is did you join us for Fundraising 101? So we had 2 weeks ago, we had a fundraising session, and let us know if you participated. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Jeopardy. All right, so it looks like 85% of you joined us a couple of weeks ago, and 15% of you are new to this week's webinar, so welcome. And our last poll that we want to just ask before we get started is, Your role in your organization, are you an executive director, CEO, a board member, development staff, or other staff? Give folks a couple of seconds. All right, Kelly, it looks like 18% of our participants are their CEOs, 55% are board members, 18% development staff, and 9% other staff members. So we're going to go ahead and change you as the presenter. All right.
Are we good?
You're good.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this Fundraising 201 webinar. I'm especially appreciative to those of you who were on 2 weeks ago, and I promise my goal is to try and not knock my phone off the hook this time. So I'm holding my hands, but hopefully my voice will be more animated and I won't be able to disrupt my own webinar, which was sort of comical. All right, thank you all for being here. I wanted to mention this level is for anybody to enjoy, and I'm thankful to all the staff and the board members that are participating. And my caveat is that I was never trained how to do major gifts, like I was really never trained how to do fundraising in the first place. And so I'm sharing what I've personally learned through a lot of trial and a lot of error, and hopefully will help you create a strong major gift program with some takeaways today. Even if you can think of one thing to do differently or better, then I've succeeded. So let's begin. We did this last time, but I wanted to mention the life cycle again, especially for the 15% of you who are new today. Every organization goes through this kind of life cycle. And I truly believe that when you have a strong annual fund campaign, there will be a time where you are going to want to realize more artistic dreams and vision. And so at that point, you will start going from sustaining, and then you're going to have to redefine yourself. And the redefinition, when you loop back where it shows mature and renew, that's really where you can focus on major gifts because they are transformative gifts. And so by doing that, you will be able to continue to grow your organization over time. So are you ready to grow? You don't have to check off all of these, but if you've got a healthy annual giving campaign, people are giving to you annually through your renewal subscriptions or through your direct mail appeals. You have people are giving because they love what you do and who you are, your values-based fundraising that we reviewed last time, that you have a diverse portfolio of annual donors. And the next screen will explain that. But that you have some individuals, you've got some events, you might have some corporate money, some government money, some foundation money, that you have a sustainable stewardship program. You've got people, whether it's on the board or on staff, who are thanking people, and that you can enact, because major gift requires a much higher level of sort of intensity. And so you want to make sure that some of the nuts and bolts of your annual campaign are in place. That you have an engaged giving board of directors. Now, this helps. It's not critical, but it does help when everybody has got the idea that they're all responsible for fund development, even if they're not soliciting, that they are engaged and they can serve as ambassadors for you. That you have a designated fundraising team. You've got those systems in place, whether it's staff or board, but you've got people who are designated to fund development, and that you have a history of stable finances or financial growth. Now that last one is tricky because sometimes I've had to do crisis fundraising, which we'll talk about later. But what donors want to, you can do that once, but what they want to see is that you're learning from your business model errors or mistakes, or you're showing stability over time. It doesn't have to be you've ended in the black every year, but it has to show that you are improving every year, because they're about to give you big checks, which requires them to have a greater level of confidence in you. So that's important. A healthy annual campaign, of course, as most of you know, you have a diverse portfolio. And as we talked about, after any major world crisis like 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina or what happened in 2009, The first money to dry up is typically the corporate money, because they will, just fund their core corporate programs. The next level is foundation money, because their assets are shrinking. And so when you see some kind of recession, that's the first money to dry up. So if you had to rely heavily on foundation and corporate money after any one of those world crises, you were probably in trouble and looking at ending in the red. It's the individuals that will sustain you during the darkest of times. So it's important, and that's why I spend most of my time on individual giving. So what is a major gift? I get asked this all the time. If you receive it or if you don't, it will make a difference. So for example, if you're a $200,000 orchestra, if you get a $25,000 gift, will that change what you do? Probably. You'll probably be able to do a lot more, some new concert or some major guest artist. If you've been relying on that $25,000 gift and you don't get it, will that change what you do? Probably. So that's how you know, whether it's $25,000, $1 million if you're the LA Phil, maybe, I don't even know, or $1,000, whatever that dollar value that matters, that's going to be transformative. That's what a major gift is for you. It's really customized. These are gifts that tend to be transformative. For the donor, they want to leave a legacy. They want to make a dream come true. They're investing in you. So it takes time. The bigger the gift, the more time it takes to get that gift. We're going to review all of these today because it can be very daunting when you look at all the kinds of major gifts. So types of major gifts, of course, these are sponsorships, concerts, education programs, gala tables. Many of you probably do this already, where you have corporations that fund your series, or you have donors that buy a gala table. Those are your typical sort of major gifts where you sort of hope for them annually. You might, if you get a big gift, you might do something different with your concerts. You might drop screens, or you might bring in a bigger guest artist. But typically, these are gifts that are based on an annual basis. The other kind of major gifts are special projects. Let's say you want to do a recording or a commission, something bigger, something that takes more time, more lead time. Those are the special projects, major gifts. They're not necessarily annual, but they can be something that you're trying to get commitments for next year or 2 years down the road. The difference between a challenge gift and a matching gift is really just the timing of the donor, when they want to give you the gift. So for example, this year we had a board member who wanted to give us the gift up front. And then she said, I challenged the board and everyone else to match me. So she gave us the initial gift, let's say it was $10,000. And then staff went out and the board went out to try and get the other 10. So her gift actually was $20,000 total. She was able to facilitate a $20,000 gift. The matching gift, sometimes donors like to be at the end. So they'll say, I'll give you $1 for every dollar you raise. So that means that you go and raise 10,000, and then you go to the donor and say, you get to match it now. Sometimes the donor will do both. So one year I had somebody give us a gift up front. It was for this organization. It was actually, they pledged to give us $100,000, and they said, and you go out and raise it, and we'll give you it at the end. So we did this challenge. We got $120,000 back. So I was actually able to go back to the donor and say, good news, we got $120,000. Did you want to match that last 20? And they did it. So you never know. They were so thrilled with how the community supported it. These kinds of gifts tend to be things that are above and beyond your annual fund. So we're very clear that if you're going to give to this particular campaign, it has to be new money or money above and beyond what you're already giving. It doesn't count. Let's say if you've got a donor that gives you $1,000 every year, and all of a sudden they just give that same $1,000 to the challenge gift. It's got to be above and beyond. And so we're really clear in all of our materials that this is new money. The multi-year gift and pledges, these are great to have, of course. We love it when somebody commits $10,000 a year and they let us know now that they're going to commit over 3 years the same level. It helps us program better. That's really dependent on the macroeconomics. So if people are feeling really comfortable with what's happening nationally and they're feeling secure, you'll see more of those multi-year gifts. People will be more comfortable pledging those. with the tax reform, we're seeing a lot of people pull back. They just don't know, they're scared. And so they may give you the same amount, but they're just not going to commit to it up front. Restricted versus non-restricted gifts. So a restricted gift would be to fund a special thing, a special project. And you know, those are fine. They're fine if we are intending to do that project no matter what. But a non-restricted gift, of course, is they just give to the annual fund, or they give to sponsor something that's already in the budget. We love non-restricted gifts because it allows the organization more freedom. Sometimes donors will want to give you a restricted gift for something that is not part of your plan. And that's a conversation. So you would go back to your board, your executive committee, or your staff and say, they want to fund an all Lutoslawski concert. And the board might say no. And so you have to go back to the donor and say, you know, can we just do one Lutoslawski piece? Because we can't do a whole Lutoslawski concert. The board feels that might jeopardize our patron loyalty. Or I've had somebody want to give a gift for something that is not part of our mission statement at all. And I tried to go back and negotiate it and try and get them to give to something else. And they wouldn't, and we lost a big gift. But it's better to make sure that you are true to your mission and that you get other people involved in that conversation, and you try and get the donor to understand what your mission is and what your values are, and to not sway from your mission, because that can lead to a lot more problems. You know, you start to go mission stray is what that's called. Endowment, not everybody has an endowment, but you know, the great thing about having an endowment is we have a special group that oversees how that money is stewarded, and it's very conservatively invested, and it kicks off, let's say, 3 to 5% a year. So if you've got $1 million endowment, which is awesome, then that's going to kick off, you know, $50,000 a year to your organization. It's $50,000 less you need to fundraise, or it can go towards underwriting your music director or something. It's great to have those savings. It's very dangerous to spend it. So it's not supposed to be a cash reserve. It's not supposed to be when you're about to end the black to pull down from the endowment. That really is a long-term strategic plan. You can have an endowment campaign, or you can just have a program that sits there, and then when people pass away, the money could go there. Some people want to give to the endowment. They believe in that kind of legacy giving. A capital campaign tends to be brick and mortar. And so it can also be for computers, a computer upgrade, or equipment. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then plan giving, I've launched plan giving programs in the last 2 organizations because it's pretty easy and can be passive, where you just encourage people in your program book to remember you in their estate plans. It can be much more complicated, and with universities and, you know, bigger organizations, healthcare, their whole plan giving departments. But for those of us who don't have a lot of time to spend on something that's not immediate, it can just really be a passive way to let people know that you have one. So that's the difference between the challenge and matching. I think I already covered that. It just depends on timing of the gift. And the difference between a campaign and a program. A campaign is time specific. So we're going to start this date, and we're going to end it this date, or we're going to end it when we have this kind of money, this goal. A program is ongoing, and the perfect example is plan giving. Plan giving tends to be a program. It's something that's there. It's something that you're not spending. You don't have a committee that's rallying around it necessarily, that's going out and trying to get plan giving gifts. It just sits there like a passive public relations campaign, versus a campaign where you need to actually create a committee, you have a goal, and you rally a lot of energy, and it has a short duration or a finite duration. Your plan giving program, this is an area that I probably know the least about, but that's why I have a council of experts. So I've acquired a plan giving council that comprised of a financial planner, a CPA, and some other folks who can advise people. All I know is that it's a legacy program that a lot of people, they don't have to give, especially if they're having a hard time financially right now, they don't have to give you cash now, but they can plan to support you after they've passed. And so it's a way for people to feel like they're investing in your organization or contributing without actually coming up with the cash now. And you can recognize them in your program book. So, and many people call it a certain name, Bravo, Encore, something. And this is a way for people to remember you in their estate plans. So tips for success in a plan giving program: just create a name, create a council, create some policies and procedures, kinds of things you will accept and won't accept. And there are a lot of organizations that can help you with this. You don't have to pay and hire a plan giving consultant. A lot of us do this already. You advertise in your program books and online, and you can see a lot of us do this on our websites. You list people, you encourage testimonials at board meetings, and if you have time, you host gatherings to thank donors and inspire others. It's you may never see the fruits of your labor here, but it will, over time, people will hopefully remember you when they pass away, and it could be, a lot of money. You don't know. Endowment campaigns, I mentioned this before. The money invested can generate annual revenue. Now, I say in campaign because you can have an endowment program that just sits there waiting for people to pass away or waiting for people to give to you. Or you can actually launch an endowment campaign committee and go out and find people who want to give to your endowment. It is probably the hardest money to raise because it's going towards legacy and the future, and people don't necessarily see that kind of short-term gratification of having that short-term benefit. It can be restricted or unrestricted. So, for example, you can go and ask somebody to give to your endowment, and the money that it kicks off could endow your concertmaster chair, or meaning pay for that person's annual salary, or it can, so in ways it can be restricted. But you're going to come up with that budget anyway. You'd have to do that anyway. So that's a great way to get people invested through restricted giving that doesn't take away. You can have a gift that endows your education program. It's overseen by a separate committee, and the committee makes sure that the money is invested according to a policy that they've created. So it's important, though, if you're going to do a campaign, to set realistic goals. And I'm going to give you a trick later about how to make this easier. Again, brick and mortar, naming opportunity. People love to see their name on buildings. Some people do. You give it all levels for a capital campaign, but you start with the biggest gifts first. You tend to not go public with a capital campaign until you have half the money in. So let's say you're trying to raise $1 million. You want to have $500,000 in pledges before you go public, and because that's the seed money is the hardest money to get. So you try and get those lead gifts early, and then you open it up to the public. And this is where you see, buy a brick, buy a leaf, get your name engraved on that kind of public campaign. Those people who give the biggest gifts tend to want to be part of your capital campaign committee. And that's great. So you've now got all these champions who want to go out and help other people, their friends, help give towards a capital expenditure. So you can often get a fundraising consultant, somebody else, because meanwhile you're trying to do annual fundraising or even major gift fundraising. So capital campaigns, it usually requires that you have money spent just in the consultant or the tours or the lunches. You have to allocate a separate budget just for that campaign. So I strongly believe in bundling campaigns. I've done this a number of times, and what I like about it is it's a way to make one ask for like 3 separate things. So if you've got a deficit on your books, nobody really gets excited about a deficit reduction campaign. So if you have a deficit on your balance sheet, to go out and do a campaign to raise your deficit is harder than even an endowment campaign. Nobody wants to give to, deficits. But you can lump it in towards in a different bundled campaign. So let's say my example is You have an artistic fund, and that's the stuff that gets people really excited, right? They want to have a fund for, new projects or commissions or recordings or expensive guest artists, special projects. That's what gets people, that's the short-term gratification piece that gets people excited. So maybe that's, $1 million. But then let's say you have a $250,000 deficit as well. So you bundle that in, and then maybe you want to raise another $1 million in endowment. So now you've got $2 million plus that you're trying to raise. So you go to a donor and say, here's our plan. We want special projects. That's short term. We want long-term endowment. And of course, we need to erase that little deficit on our books. So it's 3 asks really in one. The reason to do this is because you can only do one of these campaigns every few years, like every 3 to 5 years. So it's important to show the donor we want to get healthy, and it's financially responsible for us to erase that deficit. We want to be visionary, that's your artistic fund, and we want to be stable and sustainable, and that's your endowment. And people get that. They understand sort of the vision for the future campaign, which is what I typically call it, allows you to do all of that in one ask. And then you don't hit them up in 2 years for the next campaign. You're actually bundling all those campaigns into one. So the second time I ever did major gift fundraising was for crisis fundraising. I was in an organization that was going down, and we had to go to people who sort of knew who we were, and we didn't have time to spend on a long cultivation because we weren't going to make payroll. And so we actually had to sort of expedite the cultivation phase. And so this is okay to do. We've all had to do them, but you just can't do it too often, because if you go back in a year and say, oh, here we are again with, they will just lose confidence in you, and they should. They are, the donors are happy to help out, but it can't be because of your bad business plan. They're happy to help out if it's, some major world crisis, or after 2009, we saw a lot of people helping out. So do it rarely. They have to, of course, be personal asks. Be transparent. Show them your plan. Show them your financials. Show them why. And if it's painful, if there was embezzlement, tell them that. You don't want to make it public. You don't want it on the front page of any newspaper, but you have to be completely honest about why you're in a crisis. Don't do this annually, or they won't do it annually. I never believe in making them public. I mean, unless you're literally going to close your doors. But what are you going to rally? Then it's just negative PR sent out into the world. I think all of this has to be done personally and privately, and because we've seen too many times where those organizations just go down once it goes public. So don't continue the blame. Don't blame your predecessor. Don't blame 2009. I serve on the NEA grant panel. People are still blaming 2009 for their current situation. That was a decade ago. You can't keep blaming others. You have to take responsibility and be honest and transparent. I've given you a second to read that because when I started with Long Beach Symphony, they didn't realize what kind of crisis they were in until I sort of revealed how bad it really was. So it can be a great way, as dark as it is, it can be a great way to come in and align your troops and build trust with you and with the organization. It can be painful, and it was, but we rallied together and we didn't lose one board member during that process. We also made sure that I brought the press in locally because they kept asking if there were any problems. And so I just asked them to give me time so that I would give them the opportunity to write about the turnaround story instead of making this go public, because that could have taken us down. And so instead, I gave them the first right to write the turnaround story, which they did. I just needed time to turn it around. So crisis fundraising can be an advantage. You don't want to be there, but it can be a way to gain community support and gain trust in you and that you know what you're doing. So this is going to look very similar to 2 weeks ago. The role of your fundraising team is matchmaker. And just as a reminder, it isn't about you. It's not about me. And that was my big problem in the beginning, if you remember, is it was all about my goals and my timelines and my gift charts. And that's overwhelming. And it's hard to sleep at night when you think that you're responsible for the success or failure of the organization. It's really about we're matchmakers, and we're going to meet kind, generous people who will give back because that's who they are. And we just introduce them to this organization. So at this point, you probably have a robust circle of giving, or at least a circle of giving, where you've got people who are identifying prospects, you are cultivating, you are soliciting, you are stewarding, you are renewing, you are upgrading, you're moving people through this revolving circle. The same is true with major gift acquisition. The difference is it can take longer. It can take me, from the time I meet somebody who can make a big gift, it can take me 7 encounters before they will actually give. So just from prospect identification to solicitation, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. Because what they're doing is they're evaluating you. You know they have wealth because you've probably seen their names and program books on walls, but they're trying to figure out whether you're a good investment. And this is different. This is a different mindset than just your annual giving campaign. This takes a lot longer. It takes a lot of sometimes concerts and lunches and dinners where you bring the music director in at certain points. You're very strategic. You have a file in each one of these people. You're logging your conversations with them. So make sure that you've got all of those people in place. You have a clear goal of what you're hoping that they'll contribute to because you've listened to them. You know them well. You know when it's a good time because you've been listening to, are they investing in another organization? Are they part of another major gift campaign? Or are they ready for you? So it's all about relationship development. Who or what is not in the middle of the circle. It is not your music director. It's not your board president. It's not your staff member. It's all about the values of the organization and the goals and getting people to buy in and invest in the values. So of course, what is your orchestra value? And we did this a couple of weeks ago. It's critical that you spend some time with your board deciding what you value, because that's where you're going to find your major gift prospects. They know what they value. They're writing checks to fund what they value. So if you are going to launch an education program, you look for people who value education, for example. And that would be people who are funding student-focused organizations like your Boys and Girls Clubs and your YMCAs. Again, where to find your major donors. Now, hopefully they're warm. Hopefully they know who you are. I wouldn't ask somebody that's never given to the Long Beach Symphony to give us $100,000. They're not going to anyway, by the way. They want to take their time to get to know you. So most of the major gift prospects are all warm anyway. Most of your major gift prospects have been giving you, could be small gifts every year. It could be $500 or $1,000 every year. And so you already know who they are. It's more important that your board members also know who all of your top donors are, and they feel very comfortable with your leadership in the organization. So prospecting is a little easier with major gifts because you're not trying to find, they're not cold, they're warm. So now what? So now you have, let's say it's a board member who's been giving you $5,000 every year, and your music director wants to do a recording. Those are expensive. So what do? You create a personalized strategic plan on every one of your board members or every one of your major donors, and you have a way to track activity. So make sure you've got this kind of nuts and bolts in place. So the difference with major gifts, again, with major gift fundraising, is you're really spending a lot more time strategizing. And this is the part of my job I absolutely love. I spend as an executive director probably 50% of my week strategizing or involved in fund development in some way, whether it's prospecting or I'm meeting with people or I bring board members or other staff members with me. And it's really important during the cultivation phase that you're bringing other people with you, that it's not just about you, that you bring a board member or you bring a staff member so that they get to know more people. But during this prospecting, you're trying to determine whether your values align, whether they are excited about commissions. Maybe they can't stand recordings, or they can't stand commissions, or they don't want to record. They don't believe in Beethoven, or recording Beethoven, more importantly. So you want to make sure that your major gift idea that you're thinking about for them matches what they actually want. And sometimes we'll meet with people and say, we want to launch a family series, and we'll get some, what do you think about that? Do you think that's interesting? And you'll get a pretty clear indication, no or yes, or tell me more about it. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to match what your goals are, your values are, with what the donors are. Because what if they, can't stand, the idea of family concerts? You better switch gears and have a plan B. And then you select the best ambassadors. Sometimes it's not always the person you think it is. So, for example, my development director she sort of adopts certain relationships because they really respond well to her, and whereas I do others, and the board president does others, and we sort of strategize about who the best solicitors or contacts would be. To me, it's not about ego. It's about making sure that the best matchmaker is involved, whomever that is. So you identify the steps. Maybe this person has come to concerts. They don't need to be brought into concerts. Maybe they need to meet with the music director to hear the vision, or maybe you strategize about the next steps. And after every encounter, you go back and you re-strategize and you retool. So it can take a long time to actually see these gifts. So you want to start early. You don't want to shorten the cultivation process. Again, don't jump too soon. We want to make sure we're not asking too soon, because your gift will be smaller, and B, you might freak them out. You don't want to freak out your donors. That if you're too rushed, that probably means you didn't start early enough. Or if something came up, you can say, this new opportunity just came up, and so let's talk about whether this is something that might interest you. That's how I actually ask for money. I don't usually ask for money. I talk about if this is a project that they'd be interested in supporting. Do they want to make a difference in this way? It's also important during the cultivation phase, especially with major gifts, that if they have a spouse or a significant other, that you include them. I don't know about you, but if I went and wrote a $10,000 check without just checking in with my husband, there would be some conversations about that. So most people, there's sort of a number that they're comfortable supporting individually. But when it comes to big gifts, usually the other person in the relationship wants to be involved. So again, identify passion, shared values, intent. Look at the 7 eyes to the right in the circle. You want to start with identifying the people, informing them, getting them interested, involving them, which is getting them to be a part of the process of getting them to champion, let's say, the recording or the commission. You want them internalized and feel a compelling need in their heart and their soul that they want to invest and that they want to immortalize this. Then they're going to help you identify new people, and the circle continues. A lot of this requires trust. So it's a much different level than annual campaign. They may want to meet with, and if you're a development associate, it's okay. At some point in time, they're going to want to meet with the leadership if it's a big enough gift. They're going to want to meet with the executive director or the board president, and actually they should. So you have to provide access to key personnel. And peer-to-peer testimonials, it's best when, if you're on the board and you're asking somebody to champion a project, it's best if you've given the gift as well. So you can say, join me in championing and supporting this project. Most importantly, this is really critical. You've got to listen. You've got to ask questions about what they love, what their vision is, what would mean something to them, what made them fall in love with music in the first place, and listen for their answers. And then when you get in the car, you get back to wherever you're going, log it on the sheet so you don't forget it. Remember, they're evaluating you too. So if they're opening up their checkbook, they want to make sure that you are secure, that it's a sound investment, that your leadership is competent, and that you are going to honor their gift, and that you're going to provide consistent artistic delivery at whatever level. That it's they're looking for reliability and dependability. So again, when I solicit or ask for money, those kinds of terms scare me, so I don't. I tend to share a problem or an opportunity and together create solutions. So let's say we wanted to, right now we're looking to launch a family series next year. We received seed funding this April to do one concert. So we're getting everybody we can that might be interested to this particular concert to get them excited. And then we want to say, look, we want to bring in all the diverse communities, and that's going to require busing people down to downtown. And we want to bring in this guest artist, or we want to launch this particular multi-series family concert. And so this is where you get people to buy into your goals and your values and get them excited, and together they can start creating solutions. And this is truly what we've been going through for the last 6 months with this family concert. You want them to invest into the problem or the opportunity, and you want them to come up with the solutions, because that equals an emotional connection to the project. Then you want them to be champions, and you want them to refer new people and their friends who might be excited by it. Tell the story, state the problem, ask them to buy into the solution. The answer is always no if you don't ask. So as I always say, you'll be 100% successful at failure if you never ask. So if you want to have some chance of success at doing these bigger projects, then you have to introduce them to the concept and see if they're excited about it. What if they say no? It's okay. Sometimes that means not now or not yet. Not now because maybe they're doing another campaign, they're funding somebody else's campaign, or not now because their child just went to Stanford or they're doing a huge home remodel. Not yet could mean it requires a little more time. We had this exact same problem, not problem, but 3 years ago we went in, we thought they were ready, they weren't. It required 2 more years for this particular couple to feel comfortable enough. It's a dialogue, it's not an ask. Think of it as a relationship. Be careful though that you don't saturate them. If you ask too often, or you introduce them to too many concepts without stewarding them appropriately, they'll resent you. So be careful when you're strategizing about them. We tend to have a strategic campaign where we don't just campaign the cultivation steps, but we also campaign the stewardship steps. And this is where board members can be really helpful, and this is how it often happens. I would include a staff member in that conversation if it's appropriate, though. I would include a staff member at that table, not just between board, because staff members, if you've got staff members, they tend to be able to come in with some of the logistics, like how do you want your name to be listed? And sometimes it's up to staff to sort of focus on those details. Again, you want to strategize stewardship, especially with your major donors. It's all about staying connected. So make sure you have time and resources for a manageable program, and make sure you calendar this. So for example, I'll meet with my development director every week, and we'll talk about the next month of who's doing a lunch, who we're strategizing. We spend a lot of time strategizing about moves management and how to move people through the circle of giving. Keep your donors informed, ask how they want to be informed. Some just want a newsletter, some want phone calls, some want visits, many want lunches. They usually want privileged access. So when our music director's in town, we are very careful about how to utilize our music director. We're very jealous of his time because we only have him for so many weeks a year. And so we will strategize about what group of people or what couple or what donor gets to have lunch or dinner or come to a rehearsal. And we're very careful about that. But we are also making sure that some people are in their cultivation phase, Some are about to be solicited, some are in the stewardship phase, some we want to renew or upgrade, and we're always strategizing about it. It is important, though, that you have monthly contact, whether it's a phone call or an email or a breakfast. I think with your major donors, you don't have that many typically, that, you know, and maybe it's your board president is championing those 3 relationships and your music director is championing those 2 relationships, and you can piece it out, but make sure that these people remain engaged. And by doing that, you'll get them to champion your particular project, or just be an ambassador for your organization, whether they're on the board or not. And not all major donors make great board members. It's a different kind of skill set. So some are just better being major donors. Some want to be on the board so they can help with the governance and oversee how their gifts are being accounted for in the financials. So we also have gift clubs. When I started here, the sort of the biggest individual gift was $10,000, and they'd never been asked for more, or it had been years since they'd been asked for more. And so we just created a $15,000 level and invited them to go up to the next level, and they did. So then it worked. And so we just created a whole nother gift club level, a new concert master circle of $25,000, and we created a music director circle of $50,000. And over the course of the last 5 years, we've been able to move people up. And it was sort of a surprise. You know, that's the good news. It was a surprise that they wanted to percolate up, and they could percolate up. It was a great thing. And so now we have you know, people giving it at a bigger level, which is awesome. And those are people that will go back when we're ready to launch a campaign in a couple of years. We'll go back to them. Of course, now we have a robust major giving program that we didn't have 5 years ago. Pledge fulfillment. If you keep them connected, they'll fulfill their pledges, they'll renew their gift, and hopefully upgrade. Make sure when you recognize your major donors, some want to be anonymous, because the minute you put their name on a program book or a wall is the minute that every other nonprofit in your community goes after them. So be very careful and make sure. Some love it, some don't. So you just have to have that conversation with them before you announce it anywhere. Some want to have their name on a series, so you have to determine that. Your classics series, for example, what is that price tag to get your name as a classic sponsor? So we have a classics sponsor, we have a pops sponsor, and in addition to those series sponsors, you can also have the silo funding of each concert. So for us, it's $100,000 to sponsor our classical series or our pop series. And that means you get your name on the series. And before we rebrand the series, we make sure that that really is a multi-year commitment. But then in addition to that, to get your name on a concert, a specific concert, it's $25,000. Other people can give to that concert, but you're not going to get sort of, the bigger font and the announcement from the stage. So you start to create this kind of benefit structure that helps you and helps the donors know what they're going to get, how many tickets to that concert, are they going to get their name at a reception, or, verbally in the program, of course, are their names going to go on the screens, that kind of thing. You can think about it, just make sure it's manageable. And everybody's different at the major gift level. They're very different. Some people, again, want to be anonymous, some don't. Some want the access to the music director, some want to be left alone. So that conversation continues. Whatever you do, don't just ask and then forget to recognize or steward them and ask again, because other people have been giving them a lot of love in that time. And if you're not giving them love during that time and keeping them connected, there's a chance they won't renew. Always done in person. I always attempt to upgrade or obtain a multi-year commitment unless you're aware of a reason why it's not a good time. So for example, we'll say now in February, next year, we'd love to do Beethoven's Nights. It's going to be expensive. We have to hire 4 soloists. We need to hire a choir. It's an expensive concert for us to do. So are you thinking next year that your giving might increase to help us with that? Is this something you would be excited about? And if they say, no, I'm going to barely maintain my $10,000 gift, well, then you can say, thank you so much. I understand. And we're just so appreciative because we wouldn't be able to do what we do without you, and blah, blah, blah. But you're always trying to, when you're programming, when you're doing your budget now is the time to have those conversations about next year. Right now, we're having a lot of conversations with our corporate partners about what is your intent for next year. And they are very happy to tell us if things are looking good or if they're nervous. And they appreciate being asked because they don't want you to program based on counting on their gift and then have it not come through, which would jeopardize you being able to end in the black or the red. So, we do keep track of all of our individual donors and what they like. Do they like education? Are they into Beethoven? Are they into Brahms, Mozart? Are they former pianists? You keep track of all that information because then we could say, we're thinking of bringing in this fabulous pianist next year. It can be a little more expensive than we normally do. Is this something you might be interested in upgrading your gift or renewing your gift to support? We do that a lot. It's great if they just give you this unrestricted gifts where I'm just going to give you 15 every year because that's what we do. But oftentimes our donors need they need a compelling reason why. And we have a lot of compelling reasons why, because we produce live art. So those are conversations we're having now about next season. And know your donors' personal situations to avoid bad timing. If you're going to get together for lunch and while you're standing there waiting to be seated, they dump all these reasons about, we're doing this huge home remodel and my child's now going off to Harvard, and that tax reform is scaring me to death. What they're trying to tell you is this might not be a good time to talk about next year. They're nervous. There are certain times when it's usually not a good time to talk about next year, and that would be when everybody's planning their taxes or when they're paying their taxes. So, March, April tends to be not really good times for our donors. We tend to have a problem with those months, so that's when we really throw more effort at stewarding them. During a presidential election, no matter who it's been and when it's been, as long as I've been fundraising, the worst time to try and solicit gifts or talk to your major donors is October, because everybody's being inundated with just this, massive marketing campaigns for the politicians. And so October, November, and then November can be tough if it didn't go the way they'd hoped. So we've had a lot of those conversations with our donors about, those kinds of things and making sure that we're very sensitive to what's going on in the world. Strategies that don't work. Okay, so sometimes the first thing that goes in your budget is eliminating stewardship expenses. It takes money to make money, as you all know. So we have line items that have, so much money for cultivation and so much money for stewardship. And it's easy to want to cut those, but it's so important not to, because especially with major gifts, if you don't get them, remember, it's going to be a problem. So you have to invest, and it's hard, especially when you're looking at, competing costs and you don't have a lot of money. So you try and have coffees instead of expensive dinners, but you have to have some money in the organization to allocated towards cultivation and stewardship. Yes, it's always great if your board members pick up the tab, but you always have to be prepared they may not. And so that's just part of your annual budget that you don't touch. It's dangerous to create a culture of repertoire-dependent giving. Now, I mentioned that we're asking people to sponsor the Beethoven 9 concert because we know that some people love Beethoven 9. But really, you want them to, so I'll meet with a donor and I know they love Beethoven, but let's say next year we're not doing any Beethoven. The problem is you don't want to jeopardize that $10,000 gift just because you're not doing Beethoven. So you try and get them to be less dependent on a particular repertoire or a particular composer and more about the values. So if your values are that you present contemporary music, let's say that, it's not a particular composer they like, but you're doing somebody else that they might like. You try and get them to just support the values of the organization and not a particular composer, because you can see the danger in that. You also don't want them to give money only because they love your music director or your board president or your executive director. And the danger in that is, of course, once one of those people goes away, which we all do at some point in time, you don't want those donors to fall out. You want them to actually, it goes back to values-based fundraising. Yes, they may love your music director, but you want to try and transition, if you get a new music director, transition those relationships. Ideally, your outgoing music director helps you with that transition. But either way, you want to give them a heads up. You want to get your major donors involved in the music director search, involved in some of those music director lunches when you're doing your candidacy lunches, so that they feel really good about that person and will support them long after the other music director that they loved left. And so pitching the organization's line items or needs, that was my big failure in the beginning when I just said we need $10,000 to make payroll. Wasn't a really compelling ask. Or my goal is to get $10,000 donors this year, and I have 4 and I need a 5th. Not a compelling ask. So don't do that. And try not to request too often, too soon, or too quickly. Tips for success. So major gift, it should all be done in person. Please don't ever write a letter to somebody who gives you whatever that is, $5,000 or whatever it is, and say, please upgrade your gift and please give me $5,000 and please upgrade it by 5%. I'm pretty offended when organizations tell me that I should give just because costs have gone up 5%. It just doesn't resonate with my heart. So what I really like is I want to hear how my gift has been invested. I want to hear what their goals are, and share your story, and I'll want to give you more. Again, include both partners in the process. Know your donors. Set monthly moves management goals. That means, remember the circle of giving. I'm going to meet with 5 new people 5 donors I don't know well, or subscribers that have been donating and subscribing for a very long time. Or this week, I'm going to have 3 lunches where I'm going to steward somebody. You have to be very strategic, because I don't know about you, but my time can get carried away with just responding to emails. So you have to be very strategic. Again, it's not about ego. Match solicitor to donor. Match the person who would be the most effective with your donor, and maybe it's not you. Explain the need, how they can help solve the problem, or how they can become a hero and champion a cause. People like to be considered heroes. Listen more, talk less. People only give when they are asked. And join me, as we mentioned, is the most powerful statement. I wanted to end with my first major gift was when I was director of education for Pacific Symphony. And I had no idea that there had been a cultivation process. My executive director just said, I need you to meet with this donor, and they want to fund one of your education programs, so I need you to talk about it. So great, we went to their place. I was enthusiastic about this particular education program we launched. And then right then, my executive director said, so can we count you in for $500,000 to the donor? And they said, yes, absolutely. And I thought, wow, this is easy. I had no idea until later that A, it's not easy, and B, they had been working on that particular donor for 2.5 years. And I was brought in sort of just for one moment in time. But I thought after that, that actually was the reason why I left being an education director and decided to become a development director, was because, well, A, I thought it was easy, but B, I saw how you can actually be that matchmaker and secure this fabulous education program I've been giving my heart and soul to for so long. And I thought this is a very cool thing, to be able to help these people make a difference and help these people leave a legacy. And that's what turned me on to fundraising. So I leave you with that. And now, hopefully there's some questions.
We don't have any questions right now, but folks, if you just want to type in your questions into the chat, I think folks were just listening to your presentation. And I have made some of those same mistakes that you have made, Kelly, by just thinking it was me that made the ask and it happened, and doing things by email. Actually, I'm going after a Renewal and the connections, and oh, just email them. And I said, well, I'll email them for a phone call, but I'm not gonna do my ask over email.
Yeah. So actually, I have a question right here. My development associate has been listening to the webinar, and he asked a really good question. His is, when you are a new lead development staff person at an organization, how long should you wait to start a new major campaign? It's a really good question, because you don't have necessarily any of the relationships you've not built the trust. It depends on whether there are other people who have those relationships who can bring you into the fold of that campaign. So I would say that it depends on the situation and whether there are people already in place with those new relationships. If not, then you need to wait, because they need to develop their trust and respect in you. Wait, it depends. It can be 6 months, it can be a year, getting to know them, and then talking with them about their vision for the organization and how invested they are. So you sort of have to monitor that and talk to your staff and board president.
Awesome. We do have a question. When you say don't present line items to donors, does that include specific concerts or events, or are you talking about sort of the general ledger?
Oh, that's a good question. And Mitch, do you have me muted? Are you muted?
No.
Okay, because I can hear an echo. Are you? Oh, that's better. So I always present, if I'm going to talk to a donor about a specific concert, I always present the concert budget. And so they can see that it takes $125,000 or whatever it is to put this concert on. And they can see all the different expenses. And they might want to underwrite a particular guest artist or some particular thing on that menu of opportunities. Or I'll present them a menu of this education program costs this, and this concert costs this, and we'll talk about the different kinds of opportunities for their support. What I mean by don't present a line item, I mean, like, if my internal fundraising goal is $100,000 and I have a gift chart that says that I'm going to get 2 $20,000 gifts and 3 $5,000 gifts and 4 $2,500 gifts, they don't really care about my gift chart. That's what I mean by line items. That's not compelling to show them, that I need to raise $100,000. So what are you going to give me? They want to fund a thing, especially at the major gift level. They want to fund a project, or they want to give towards a certain cause.
Great. Well, the only other comment in the chat section is a great presentation, covered all the points, so no questions here.
Yay! Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Well, we thank you, Kelly, so much. And I just want to remind folks that this summer, fundraising will definitely be the topic of some of our sessions at the 2018 annual conference. So save the date, August 9th through the 11th. And if you do have questions later on about today's program, please feel free to email us at membership@acso.org, and we will send the link once the recording has been published to you so that you can re-review or share it with others. So on behalf of Kelly and ACSO, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.